Well, good afternoon, Michiganders. It is Tuesday, March 1st, 2022. And of course, this is Tuesday with Tom, Michigan's only weekly internet show where we do answer your questions about estate planning and estate settlement in Michigan, and we don't send you a bill. As always, I'm your host, Tom Doyle, estate planning attorney, lifelong Michigan resident, and ambassador for all things good in this great state of Michigan. Welcome to today's program. March 2022, that means we have now been broadcasting our podcast for 6 years, going way back to February 23rd, 2016 is when the first episode of the program aired. And the title then was, What is an Estate Plan? And it was one of the more popular programs that we have aired over the time. Although the most listened to episode of Tuesday with Tom has been a previous episode entitled, Doesn't a Will Avoid Probate? Hard to believe. 6 years. Didn't imagine 6 years ago where the program would be today. If you listened to it 6 years ago or go back and listen to the first episode, it certainly sounds much different than it does today. Hopefully, over that time, we have improved the program, made it more interesting, made it more relevant to issues and concerns that you have about estate planning and estate settlement in Michigan. And we look forward to the next 6 years and what that's going to bring. Is certainly a lot has changed in the last 6 years, and I imagine there will be much more change coming up in the next 6. Well, last episode was, can someone sell your home without you knowing it? Can someone sell your home without you knowing it? I encourage all of you homeowners out there, listen to that episode to find out what sort of scams are being run regarding homes and what you can do to protect yourself from falling victim to the scam. And speaking of homes and speaking of real estate, today's show, Michigan permits a unique asset protection for married couples, Michigan real estate. But please remember, what I am about to discuss during the program is for educational purposes only. As always, it is not intended to be legal advice. You need to work with your attorney to determine what is appropriate for you and your estate plan. Michigan permits unique asset protection for married couples, Michigan real estate. If you're married and you own any real estate in Michigan, this episode is for you. When married people in the state of Michigan own real estate, and it's not limited to your home, any real estate, anywhere in the state of Michigan, that married people own their real estate, they own it by tenants. They own it as what we call tenants by the entireties, or they create a tenancy by the entireties. That is created when property is conveyed to a couple who was married at the time they receive it. It's not necessary that the deed say tenancy by the entireties. It's not even necessary that the deed refer to the married couple as married. Simply the conveyance of Michigan real estate to a married couple is going to be creating a tenancy by the entireties unless the deed says something different. Normally what you're going to see is a deed to married people is simply going to say husband and wife. Well, what does it mean? What is this unique asset protection for married couples real estate? Well, let's start with this. Tenancy by the entireties means that each spouse has what we call a survivorship right. which means what? Which means if one spouse dies, the other spouse automatically owns the property. It also means that neither spouse can transfer their interest in the property without the other's consent. So husband and wife that own Michigan real property, one of those spouses cannot simply on their own transfer that property to someone else. Why is that important? Where that is also important is when it comes into creditors of a spouse. Since the spouses have a survivorship right in the property, which basically means that each is presumed to own the entire property, and since neither of them can sell or transfer their interest, meaning their interest in that property can't be transferred to somebody else without their consent, what that means is that creditors of one spouse cannot put a lien on or cannot collect against that property that's owned by husband and wife. Let me say that again. Creditors of one spouse cannot put a lien on the property, nor can they collect, let's say they have a judgment against one of the spouses, they cannot collect that judgment against that property that is owned by a husband and wife in Michigan. That is the unique asset protection that married couples have regarding their real estate. Let me give you a real life example. Back in the day when I used to litigate or be an attorney, a litigation attorney, I didn't necessarily litigate myself, but represented other people. I had a client who was a professional who had a very sizable judgment that had been entered against him. It was in the millions of dollars, the judgment that had been entered against him as a result of a medical malpractice matter. However, his entire estate consisted of real estate, various pieces of real estate throughout the state of Michigan that were owned with his spouse. Consequently, the individual who obtained the judgment against him could not go after any of that real estate that was jointly owned with his spouse in order to collect on that judgment. And other professionals that we have done work for, it's very common to look at those professionals and talk to them about, rather than having stocks and bonds or other investments that they might have, look at possibly, having a significant portion of your estate, if not your entire estate, jointly owned real estate with your spouse so that it will be protected from your creditors. That is a unique protection that married couples have regarding Michigan real estate. Now, how can you lose that protection? Well, one way you can certainly lose that protection is if you create a situation in which somebody is going to be able to get a judgment against both spouses. Because if they can get a judgment against both spouses, that unique protection goes away relative to that Michigan real estate. And where's the most common situation? Amanda and I talk to our clients about this all the time. It has to do with automobiles. Automobiles that are jointly owned by spouses. What's the problem? The problem is, if one spouse goes out and kills somebody in a motor vehicle that's jointly owned with their spouse, there can be a judgment entered against both spouses, one for driving the car, the other for jointly owning the car. And if somebody can get that joint judgment against both spouses, that unique protection that their Michigan real estate has against creditors basically is defeated, which is why Amanda and I, in our conversations with clients, and we talk about it in seminars when we present seminars, our general recommendation to married people is not to jointly own your cars. The car should be in the individual names of each of the spouse, the primary driver of the car, so that you can maintain that unique protection from creditors. Another time that tenants by the entireties is going to go away is certainly in the event of a divorce. Couple gets divorced, that, unless the judgment of divorce states some tenants with rights of survivorship, that tenancy by the entirety is going to become tenants in common, which is no longer going to have that unique protection from creditors. But in the estate planning world, where that protection is also often lost is when somebody creates a trust and then transfers the real estate into that trust. Because transferring the real estate from a husband and wife even to a jointly owned trust in the state of Michigan means that the real estate is no longer owned as husband and wife. And because it's no longer owned by husband and wife, it can lose that unique protection from creditors. So if you have a living trust that you and your spouse have transferred your real estate to, you need to review that with your attorney and see, did that give up that unique protection that you had for your home? And if so, solution: transfer it back out of the trust to the two of you as husband and wife. Put it back owned as husband and wife. Or it could be husband and wife and wife, because this unique protection is for all married people in the state of Michigan. Put the property back in the name of the spouses. That will then have that unique protection available to them in the event a creditor comes along. Now, you're going to say to me, well, Tom, how then do we avoid probate, though? Our purpose of having transferred the real estate into our trust is we did that to avoid probate. Certainly, if we take the home out of the trust, or take whatever the Michigan real estate, not just your home, out of the trust, it no longer is going to avoid probate. So what will we do? Well, there is a solution that is available to you, and it's what lawyers generally call a ladybird deed. Now, you're not going to see the word ladybird anywhere in that deed normally, but the concept behind that ladybird deed is to transfer ownership, complete ownership of the property to your trust when you have both died. When you've both died. That way, you still own it as husband and wife. Now, obviously, if one of you dies, it's owned by the survivor. So upon the death of the first of you, that tenancy by the entirety goes away. But assuming that you die together, you have protected that tenancy by the entireties until you have both died. And at that point in time, when you've died together, your Michigan real estate would be owned by your trust. So using a ladybird deed for that married couple to protect the tenancy by the entireties so that you have that unique protection from creditors and yet still avoid probate at the time you have both died is something that you should look into and talk to your attorney about. Now, certainly if trusts were created a number of years ago, attorneys weren't generally using ladybird deeds as a tool for this purpose, but you want to revisit your trust and your deed work that was done before. It might be necessary in order to fix that to simply, again, deed it back from the trust to the two of you and then have the ladybird deed prepared, conveying the property into your trust. Well, that's going to be it for today's show. But as always, simply a reminder, though, that Amanda and I would be honored to have the opportunity to help you protect your loved ones by putting together your estate plan, perhaps amending a plan that you already have, or assist you in settling a loved one's estate. Simply head on over to Doyle Law PC. That's our website. There you're going to find information about how it is that we can be of assistance to you with our planning from home service for new clients, or if we have current clients who need to update a plan. You're also going to find information about the Update My Plan service. So head on over to Doyle Law PC, check out the virtual office. Reminder too, perhaps you're just looking for an individual document. The most frequent one today, clients need or somebody needs a new certificate of trust that a title company requires in order for a trust that owns property to sell it. You'll find the availability in the legal store, again at Doyle Law PC, to order individual documents such as certificates of trust. As always too, though, if you have a comment about the program, a topic that you'd like to have me discuss, questions that you'd like to have answered, please send me an email, tom@tuesdaywithtom.com, or drop me a postcard or a letter, Tom Doyle, P.O. Box 16066, Lansing, Michigan 48901. And as always, we encourage you, your friends and families, follow us on Facebook and Twitter. That would be Tuesday with Tom. Also follow the office. That would be Doyle Law PC. Reminder too, Tuesday with Tom is likely available wherever it is that you choose to listen to your podcasts, whether that's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcast, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, probably any podcast service that you have out there, you're going to find our program available. And if you don't, and if you have a favorite podcast service that you use, shoot me an email again to tom@tuesdaywithtom.com. Let me know that, and we'll see about having the program available on your favorite podcast service. Reminder too, you're likely going to find the program available on your smart speaker. Well, thank you again for spending some of your time with us today. And as always, I hope that you have an awesome day and an awesome week in Michigan. Stay safe. Tuesday with Tom has been brought to you by the estate planning attorneys at Doyle Law PC. To learn how we can help you with your estate plan or with settling a loved one's estate, please call us today at 517-323-7366. That's 517-323-7366.